Imagine standing on the MIT stage, graduating valedictorian, while 6 seats in the front row remain empty. My family skipped my graduation for my brother's routine football practice. Years later, when my face hit the cover of Forbes, they suddenly remembered I was their beloved daughter, and invited me to dinner to beg for millions. They thought I came to save their business. They didn't know I had already bought all their debt just to personally throw them out onto the street. My name is Laura Beckett. I am 31 years old. Yesterday, the leading national business journal released its annual rankings, and my face was on the cover. Below it, a headline announced a $98 million valuation for the platform I built, a system that manages boutique mountain lodges with a precision no human could ever match. My phone had been silent for 9 straight months. No birthday wishes, no holiday greetings, nothing but the void. Then, at 10:12 a.m., the screen flickered to life with a name I hadn't seen in a year. Dad. The message was brief. Family dinner tonight. 7:30 sharp. We have big news. I stared at the text for a long time. 9 months of being a ghost, and now, 12 hours after the world saw my success, I was suddenly invited back to the table. I typed a single sentence in response. Sorry, I'm busy. The industry gala starts at 7. I watched the read receipt appear instantly. The typing bubbles danced for a long time, hesitant and persistent. I didn't wait to see what he had to say. I locked the phone and tossed it aside. They thought they were reaching out to the same desperate, quiet daughter who used to beg for a scrap of their time. They had no idea that the girl they discarded was now the only person capable of saving them. 3 years ago, on a sweltering May afternoon in Palo Alto, California, I stood in the wings of the university stage trying to keep my breathing steady. My graduation gown hung loosely on a frame thinned by a final semester of caffeine and 3-hour nights. The honors had felt heavy, an anchor reminding me I was drifting here alone. Outside, thousands of chairs were arranged under a merciless sun. Families filled every row, a sea of waving signs and colorful bouquets. I clutched my name card so tightly the edges bit into my palms. I had sent 6 tickets to Galveston, Texas, front row, center section. I had paid for the fastest shipping, tracked the package, and seen the delivery confirmation with my own eyes. I told myself the traffic on the coast was bad. I told myself they were simply struggling to find parking. I told myself anything that would keep me from collapsing before I reached the podium. The dean began calling names. Each graduate walked across the stage to a roar of cheers from their respective sections. I kept my eyes fixed on those 6 empty seats, willing them to fill. They remained vacant. Laura Elizabeth Beckett. My name echoed across the quad. The walk felt miles long. The wooden planks groaned under my borrowed heels. The president smiled, handed me the leather-bound diploma, and shook my hand. Cameras flashed from every angle, but not one was pointed by someone who knew me. I forced a smile for the official photographer, moved my tassel, and stepped off the other side. The moment my feet hit the grass, my phone buzzed. So you actually went through with it without us. Fine. Don't expect another cent from me. You made your choice. I stopped in my tracks. Around me, the world was a blur of laughter and sobbing parents. A father nearby lifted his daughter into the air. A mother buried her face in a bouquet of lilies. I stood frozen, reading those words until the screen timed out and went dark. The air smelled of mown lawn and expensive perfume. I heard the distant pop of champagne corks. Something inside me didn't just break, it went silent. I didn't cry. I walked across the grass, past the proud fathers who would never be mine. My phone buzzed again. It was Mom. Tell us where you are. We're stuck in traffic. I didn't reply. I kept walking until I reached the edge of the campus, sat on a concrete curb, and finally let the tears fall. They were quiet, just as I had been taught to be. A janitor nearby glanced at me and then looked away. No one asked if I was okay. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my gown, stood up, and took the shuttle to the airport. I had a 9 o'clock flight back to Houston because I couldn't afford to miss my shift as a courier. I boarded the plane still wearing my cap and gown. When the flight attendant offered to hang them up for me, I shook my head. I folded them into the overhead bin like any other piece of discarded luggage. Somewhere over the desert, I opened my laptop and began writing the lines of code that would eventually put my name on that list. Empty seats teach you a very specific lesson. They show you exactly who won't be there when it matters. I decided then that the next time the world looked at me, no one would be able to look away. That row of empty seats hadn't appeared out of thin air. In the Beckett household, I had learned early on that attention was a finite resource, and it was always earmarked for someone else. When I was 12, I spent 3 years mastering the violin. My teacher entered me into a regional solo competition held on a Saturday night, at the local Performing Arts Center. I practiced until my fingertips were bruised and raw. A week before the event, Dad told me that Mark had made the varsity football team, and their first scrimmage was that same night. "We're all going to support him," he said. "Could you at least come for the second half of my performance?" I asked. Mom laughed as if the suggestion were a punchline. "Laura, family shows up for family. Mark needs us more right now." I played the concert anyway. The hall was full of people, but as I stood on that stage, my bow trembling, I scanned the crowd for faces that weren't there. I performed my piece flawlessly, took a bow to polite applause, and caught the city bus home alone with my violin case bumping against my knees. The next morning, the refrigerator was covered in photos of Mark in his jersey, Dad's arm draped over his shoulders, and Zoe holding a handmade sign. My performance certificate was tucked away in a junk drawer before the ink was even dry. That was the first time the rules became clear. If someone else needed the light, mine was summarily switched off. High school was a repetition of the same theme. Mark totaled 2 cars before his 18th birthday, and both times, Dad replaced them without a second thought. Zoe decided she was going to be an online personality at 15, so she received the latest tech and professional lighting for Christmas. When I asked for a laptop capable of running development software without crashing, Dad told me to use the library. When the college acceptance letters arrived, I was accepted into a respected state university with a partial scholarship. Dad looked at the remaining balance and shrugged. "That's a lot of money for a hobby," he said. "Maybe start with community college." 2 months later, Mark announced he wanted a gap year to travel, and suddenly, $25,000 materialized for him to backpack through Europe. I graduated as valedictorian and chose a prestigious engineering institute because their financial aid covered everything but my textbooks. Dad still insisted on sending a small monthly allowance. It wasn't an act of kindness, it was a means of control. As long as he sent that wire, he had the power to threaten to cut me off. I worked 3 jobs regardless. I spent my mornings pulling espresso shots at the campus cafe, my afternoons tutoring freshmen in calculus, and 3 nights a week delivering takeout across the city in a beat-up sedan. Most days, I smelled like burnt coffee and heavy spices, but the tips funded the server credits I needed for the code I wrote at 3 in the morning. Every winter, I returned to Galveston, hoping the atmosphere might have shifted. It never did. The family business, a fading motel built in the late 70s, was hemorrhaging money. The reviews were a graveyard of complaints about peeling paint and failing Wi-Fi. Dad refused to modernize. "People come for the Gulf, not the internet," he'd say, before spending the maintenance budget on a new center console fishing boat. I watched the bookings dwindle while Mark managed the property from the local golf course, and Zoe filmed her lifestyle videos on the beach in designer swimwear Dad had bought her. I tried to talk to him once, bringing spreadsheets and explaining the mechanics of dynamic pricing. He just patted my head as if I were still a child. "Sweetie, leave the business to the men." So, I stopped trying to help. Instead, I built my own path in the shadows. Every dollar I scraped together from those 3 jobs was funneled into servers, APIs, and the first iteration of an algorithm that could predict occupancy, adjust rates in real time, and synchronize with every booking platform simultaneously. I named the prototype Drift because it followed the invisible currents of demand that no one else was bothered to track. By the time I defended my master's thesis, Drift was already being piloted by 3 small, independent lodges. Their revenue jumped 42% in the first quarter alone. I knew then that this wasn't just a side project anymore, it was my exit strategy. Those empty seats at my graduation had been the final, cold proof I needed. I no longer required their money, their approval, or their presence. When Dad's text lit up my phone after 9 months of dead silence, I didn't feel a surge of anger. I felt a cold, clinical curiosity. I wanted to see how quickly they could rewrite months of abandonment into a family emergency that suddenly required my participation. I set the phone on the kitchen island and let the screen fade to black. My apartment was silent, save for the distant, low hum of the Gulf a few blocks away. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the lights of the boardwalk flicker on for the evening. People were heading out, laughing, arms linked, normal families living normal lives. I turned away and opened the hallway closet, the one I never used for guests. Inside hung the relics of another life. I pulled out a gray knit sweater with a frayed cuff, the one I'd worn through every final exam at the institute. I found the faded jeans that used to be my only pair and the scuffed brown boots I'd bought at a thrift store because they were $20 and waterproof. I laid them out on the bed, a costume of the person I used to be. Then, I went down to the garage. My daily driver is a matte black European sedan that still carries that intoxicating new car scent. I walked past it, past the electric car I rarely touch, and stopped at the far corner, where a 2013 silver sedan sat under a dusty gray cover. I had bought it used the week I moved back to the coast after graduation. The paint on the hood was oxidized from years of salt air and sun. The driver's side mirror was cracked, and the check engine light had been a permanent fixture on the dashboard for 3 years, because the repair cost more than the car's trade-in value. I kept it registered and insured for exactly this kind of night. I pulled the cover off, tossed it into the trunk, and slid behind the wheel. The upholstery still carried the faint, lingering scent of the spicy takeout I used to deliver. The engine turned over with a familiar, hesitant grind. I backed out slowly, tires crunching over the pristine epoxy floor, and headed south toward the older part of the city. The sun was dipping behind the skyline, bruising the sky with shades of orange and violet over the water. I rolled the windows down, and let the humid air whip through the cabin. I played no music. I wanted to feel every vibration of the drive. I thought about my first reply, the one that had prompted Mom to flood my phone with crying emojis for 20 minutes. It would have been easy to keep ignoring them, but I wanted to watch them reveal themselves. I wanted to see exactly who they were when they thought they had already won. I turned off the main highway, past the weathered strip malls and neon signs advertising cheap seafood. The Meridian Hotel appeared on the right, a restored landmark of 1920s glamour, its white columns glowing under modern floodlights. I pulled into the circular drive and came to a stop behind a line of luxury SUVs and German coupes. The valet was young, barely 20, wearing a crisp navy uniform. He took one look at my battered sedan and hesitated, clearly debating whether to park it out front or hide it in the back lot. I handed him the keys without a word. He took in my oversized sweater, my messy hair, and my frayed hem, and a smirk touched his lips. "Running a little late, ma'am?" he asked, reaching for a claim ticket. "Traffic," I said, and walked away before he could decide if I was being serious. Inside, the lobby smelled of lemon polish and old money. The marble floors reflected the massive chandeliers like still water. I caught my reflection in a gold-framed mirror, tired eyes, a hurried bun, and clothes that screamed, struggling student. "Perfect." The hostess recognized the reservation name, and her smile turned performative and bright. Right this way, Ms. Beckett. Your party is already seated. I followed her through the main dining room, past tables of couples in tailored suits and silk, past waiters balancing silver trays of oysters and prime cuts. The private dining room was at the very back, its heavy oak doors shut tight. I could hear their laughter through the wood, loud, forced, the kind of noise people make when they are trying to convince themselves that everything is fine. I stopped just outside, my hand resting on the brass handle. I felt nothing, no nerves, no lingering sadness. Only the cold, clean certainty that whatever happened in the next hour would be the last time I ever had to care what any of them thought. Then I pushed the doors open and stepped inside. I stepped into the private dining room at the meridian exactly on time. My mother saw me first. She let out a high-pitched trill that made the waiter flinch and launched herself across the carpet, her arms wide as if we were performing for a crowd. Her perfume hit me before she did, heavy gardenia and something sickly sweet. She squeezed me so hard my ribs groaned. "There's my baby girl," she cooed into my hair, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "We missed you so much." My father stood next, smoothing his navy blazer, the one he always wore when he wanted to play the part of the patriarch. He clapped both hands onto my shoulders, gave me a firm shake, and grinned wide enough to show off the expensive dental work he'd had done the previous year. "Look who decided to grace us with her presence," he said. Mark lifted his glass of bourbon in a lazy toast from his chair. "Sister. Nice threads. Going for that homeless chic vibe." Zoe was already angling her phone, a small light clipped to the case, filming everything. "Smile, Laura. This is going straight to my followers. The industry star returns to the fold." From the corner, Uncle Silas just raised his glass and grunted his approval. I let my mother steer me to the table like I was the guest of honor. The round table was draped in heavy linen and set for 6, with polished silver and wine glasses catching the light from the chandelier. A bottle of vintage champagne sat sweating in a silver bucket. My father made a grand show of popping the cork, the foam spilling over his knuckles while Mark cheered as if they had just won a championship. "To our brilliant girl," my father boomed, filling every flute to the brim. The rankings, the $98 million valuation, who would have thought our quiet little bookworm would turn into a titan of industry? They all raised their glasses. I lifted mine but didn't drink. Zoe leaned across the table, her eyes sparkling with a practiced intensity. "Okay, but seriously, when do we get the family discount on the platform? My followers are dying for luxury travel content." Mark snorted. "Yeah, or maybe invest in something that actually turns a profit. Dad's got a real plan." My father shot him a warning look, then turned his full wattage smile back on me. "We'll get to that. First, we're just so proud, aren't we, Catherine?" My mother nodded vigorously, dabbing at perfectly dry eyes with a silk napkin. "Beyond proud. I've been telling everyone at the club. My daughter, the CEO." The waiter appeared with the first course, crab cakes and tuna tartare arranged with architectural precision. My father ordered another bottle of champagne without asking anyone. The performance was flawless. He waited until the plates were cleared before sliding a glossy black folder across the table toward me. Gold foil lettering on the cover read, "The Vista Collection, a New Era." Inside were renderings of sleek white buildings, infinity pools spilling into the horizon, and models in linen sipping cocktails on rooftop decks. "We're finally doing it," my father announced, his voice dropping into the boardroom baritone he reserved for bankers. "We're taking the old site, tearing down the structures that are too far gone, and turning that prime oceanfront parcel into a 5-star wellness resort. A spa, farm-to-table dining, a partnership with a celebrity chef, it's all in the works." "This is generational wealth, Laura," my mother said, clasping her hands. "We're even keeping the Beckett name on the marquee. A legacy." Mark tapped a page showing projected numbers. "Construction starts next quarter. Total build-out is around 22 million. The banks are covering the bulk of it, but they want to see skin in the game from the family first. My father leaned in, his elbows on the table, eyes locked on mine. We need 2 million as a bridge, a family investment. 6% interest paid back in 24 months once the resort is cash flowing. It's a better return than any savings account, and it keeps everything in-house. He said in-house as if the word were sacred. My mother reached over and squeezed my hand, her diamond bracelet flashing in the light. It's what families do, sweetheart. We take care of each other. Zoe was still filming discreetly from her lap. Uncle Silas nodded along as if this were the most reasonable request in the world. My father then slid a single sheet of paper across the linen, already prepared. It was a wire transfer form with my name typed at the top, the routing and account numbers left blank. All I had to do was fill them in. I let them finish the entire sales pitch, the glossy brochures, the 3D renderings, the same tired promises. I waited until my father leaned back, satisfied, until my mother's smile started to slip from the effort of maintaining it, and until Mark checked his watch as if the deal were already closed. Then, I reached into the canvas tote I'd brought instead of a purse. I pulled a plain manila folder from my tote. There was no logo, no gold embossing, just public records printed on cheap, grainy paper. I placed it in the center of the table and opened it with slow, deliberate movements. Before I sign anything, I said, my voice as flat as the pages in front of me, let's talk about what is actually happening with the lodge. My father chuckled, still riding the high of his own performance. We just showed you the future, honey. I slid the first document across the linen. It was a notice of default from the regional bank, stamped 3 months ago. It stated the business had missed the last 4 payments on the primary mortgage. The total arrears amounted to $872,000. My mother's hand flew to the pearls at her throat. That's just a timing issue, she insisted. I turned the page and presented the second document. The bank sent the final demand letter 31 days ago. State law gives you 42 days from that letter to cure the debt before they accelerate the entire note. You are exactly 11 days away from losing everything. Mark shifted in his seat, his bravado flickering. Banks bluff all the time, Laura. It's part of the game. I didn't stop. I produced the third sheet, a recorded second mortgage from a private lender in the city, filed quietly 18 months ago against the family home on Seafoam Drive. You borrowed another $1.5 million at 14% interest. The balloon payment was due last quarter. You rolled it into a third lien last month, just to keep the lights on. Uncle Silas cleared his throat, staring into his scotch. Those are aggressive lenders. Everyone uses them in a pinch. I looked directly at my father. The house is cross-collateralized. If the business note accelerates, the bank can foreclose on the residence as well. The sale date is set automatically. You have no equity left to borrow against. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother's smile evaporated. My father's face flushed a deep, angry red beneath his tan. This is family business, he growled. You don't air these things at the table. You made it my business the second you asked for $2 million that I earned while you were pretending I didn't exist. Zoe tried for a laugh, but it came out as a strangled, desperate sound. You're being dramatic, she said. I turned to the final page, a printout from the county court docket. The foreclosure auction is already scheduled for 42 days from the final notice. That's it. There are no extensions without a full payoff. My father slammed his palm onto the table, hard enough to rattle the silver. Where the hell did you get these records? Anyone can walk into the clerk's office and pull them, I said. My attorney, Grant Abbott, did it for me last week. He is very thorough. Mark leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. So what? You came here just to humiliate us. No, I answered. I came to watch you ask the daughter you wrote off for money you have no way of repaying. My mother began twisting her napkin until the linen tore. We are your parents. You don't talk to us this way. My father pointed a thick finger at me. After everything we gave you. You gave me nothing but an allowance you could use as a leash, I interrupted. I built everything I have while you poured cash into Mark's failed ventures and Zoe's social media posts. Uncle Silas tried the path of guilt. Blood looks after blood, Laura. That's how the world works. I closed the folder. Not anymore. The shift was instantaneous. The fake warmth evaporated, leaving only a bitter, cold resentment. My father's jaw worked as if he were grinding glass. My mother's eyes filled with tears of genuine panic. Zoe's phone sat forgotten in her lap. You ungrateful little, my father began. I stood up. The chair legs scraped harshly against the floor in the sudden silence. I took out my phone and turned the screen toward him. The message from 3 years ago glowed in the dim light, the one he had sent the moment I stepped off the graduation stage. I read it aloud, word for word, in the same cold tone he had used back then. You actually went through with it without us. Fine. Don't expect another cent from me. You made your choice. My father's face drained of color. My mother froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Mark's mouth opened then closed. Zoe's phone finally slipped from her fingers and clattered against her plate. I locked the screen and looked straight at the man who had written those words. Sorry, I said, calm and clear. I'm busy. My celebration starts at 7. The sentence hung in the air like a physical blow. My mother found her voice first, her tone shrill and cracking. This is childish, Laura. My father tried to stand, but his knees seemed to betray him, and he sank back into his chair. You will not speak to me like that. I was already scrolling through my contacts. I tapped the silent mode icon so the room could hear every tone as I blocked them one by one. My father, then my mother, then my siblings and my uncle. Each soft chime sounded louder than the last. The doors behind me opened without a knock. Grant Abbott stepped in, tall, in a charcoal suit, with a leather briefcase in hand. He didn't smile, and he didn't acknowledge anyone but me. Everything is ready, he said, placing a thin blue folder on the table. The top page carried the seal of the county court, and the letterhead of the primary lender. My father stared at it as if it might explode. Grant kept his voice professional and detached. As of 4:30 this afternoon, Ms. Beckett has purchased the first position note, and all associated liens from the original lender. The bank has accepted the assignment. The acceleration stands. No cure period extension is available. My mother let out a jagged sound, somewhere between a sob and a scream. You can't do this. I already did, I replied. Mark finally erupted, his face contorted with rage. You bought our debt. What kind of monster are you? The kind who learned from the best, I said. My father's hands shook as he reached for the folder, flipping through the pages with fingers that refused to cooperate. His eyes scanned the dense legal language, struggling to grasp a reality he could no longer control. Grant continued, his voice cool and clinical. The sale remains scheduled as planned. The personal residence is included in the collateral package. Furthermore, all vehicles titled to the business will be repossessed within 10 business days. Zoe began to cry in earnest, dark streaks of mascara ruining her carefully applied makeup. This will destroy my image, she sobbed. My brand is over. Uncle Silas simply drained the last of his scotch and stared into the bottom of the empty glass. I picked up my tote bag. The chair legs scraped against the floor as I pushed it back into place. My father finally found his voice, though it sounded cracked and small. Laura, please. I walked toward the door. Grant stayed behind just long enough to slide a business card across the linen. "My office will handle all communication going forward," he said. I didn't look back. The heavy oak doors closed behind me with a soft, final click. 1 year later, I was driving through the Texas Hill Country in the autumn. The windows were down, the dry, cedar-scented air whipping through my hair as I headed toward a home I actually owned. I took the exit for the old coastal road out of habit, the same route I used to drive when I still believed that family meant something. The old neighborhood looked smaller under the amber October light. I slowed as I passed the cul-de-sac where the Beckett house used to stand behind its manicured hedges. Red foreclosure tape now crisscrossed the front door like a crime scene ribbon. A faded auction sign leaned crookedly in the yard, the grass grown high and wild around it. The marble fountain my father had installed the year Mark graduated was cracked down the middle, empty except for a handful of dead leaves. 2 houses down, a tow truck idled at the curb. The luxury SUV that used to block the driveway every Sunday was hooked up and lifted, its wheels spinning uselessly above the pavement. The driver waved at a neighbor watching from her porch, who was sipping coffee as if this were the best entertainment she'd had all season. I kept driving. At a stoplight near the industrial district in the city, I spotted Mark. He was wearing a fluorescent safety vest, unloading crates from a semi-trailer. His hair was cut short, and his skin was weathered from working outdoors. There were no designer sunglasses perched on his head. He didn't see me. He looked tired in a way that afternoons on the golf course had never made him. Zoe's face appeared in a local business journal a week later, but not in the way she had dreamed. The paper ran a story on the foreclosure in the Sunday business section. Her tear-streaked live stream, in which she tried to deny the reality of the situation, had only made the clips go viral for all the wrong reasons. Her sponsors dropped her overnight. The last post on her feed was a simple black square with a caption about taking an indefinite break. My parents moved into a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in a complex with exterior hallways and a shared laundry room. I know this because a local pawn shop sent me an automated alert when my father's gold watch appeared in their inventory. My mother's 3-carat engagement ring followed 2 weeks later. The listings were public. I never answered the unknown numbers that started calling after the auction. I didn't need to. The message had been delivered. My new house sits on a quiet lake hours away from the coast, far enough that the ocean is only a distant memory. The mailbox reads Abbott in simple, brushed steel. I changed my name legally the same week the judge signed the foreclosure order. Not because of a marriage, but because Grant was the first person who ever stood by me without conditions. Some mornings I sit on the dock with a coffee and watch the mist burn off the water. The silence here is different from the silence I grew up with. It isn't a void waiting for someone to notice me, it is the sound of finally being home. People ask if I feel guilty. I don't. I learned the hard way that love isn't a debt you owe just because you share a bloodline. A real family earns that title every single day. Mine ignored me until I became useful, then tried to cash me in like a winning ticket. I refused to be their payout. Walking away wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the first honest thing any of us had ever done. And if you are wondering whether cutting toxic people out of your life makes you the villain, remember this: peace isn't free, but it is worth every cent you will never give them again.